Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 9, Episode 51. That's Dave Bryan. I am Alex Kozora. Thank you guys so much for listening. And Dave, I hope you're living life as aggressively as Mike Tomlin does.
Yeah, he does. And you know, obviously you're talking about, you know, we talked about the other day from that Jaguars game, a few of the calls that Mike Tomlin or in-game decisions that he made. Obviously, the clock management just ahead of the 2-minute warning, and then earlier in the game in the third quarter when he decided to accept the third down penalty to make it a third and 11 or 12 or whatever it was. He was indeed asked about that on Tuesday during his press conference, and you know, in so many words, I don't know what you thought about his response. I mean, it's about, you know, kind of what we would probably expect from Mike Tomlin in those situations. But he says, I aggressively play and play to win. And, you know, talking about in regards to the acceptance of the penalty in the third quarter, he said he wanted to see why they avoided third and long so hard in that football game. And then he proceeded to say, I'm just joking. I knew why they were avoiding third and long. That's why I took the penalty. And you see what happened when they snapped that ball. That kind of seems like result bias right there. But then he goes on to say that team was working extremely hard to stay on schedule. And, you know, that's one thing I wrote in I try to be, I mean, look, it's easy when I do my keys to the game, you know, 5 keys every Saturday to say, don't turn the football over, you know, run the ball effectively. But I try to get kind of specific in there. And one thing I wrote about the Jaguars is you got to try to keep them off schedule, and they stayed on schedule. Mike Tomlin talked about that on Tuesday, saying that team was working extremely hard to stay on schedule. We needed splash plays to provide our offense potentially to short field in an effort to win the game. We weren't going to get splash plays on 3rd and 2, so you move back to 3rd and 10, and you get them, and maybe you get a sack fumble, maybe you get a pick. That's how the game goes. I'm not apologizing for that. He didn't apologize for how he used the clock because he claims that he knew they were going to run on 3rd down. Good for him. You know, look, both those calls worked out. We're going to sit here and criticize some of, you know, a lot of what he does moving forward, but it's not going to matter.
It was a very classic Tomlin answer for a very classic Tomlin decision of that aggression. Just a quick programming note for the show before I forget. It's Wednesday, so we have a beat writer on. Ryan O'Halloran from the Denver Post will join us to talk about the Broncos. That'll be coming up in about a half hour or so. But to get back to Tomlin.
Oh, happy Wednesday, by the way.
Yeah.
Hey,
I gotta work on
things,
the day.
Yeah, you got when we get into those intros there, we probably need to small talk a little bit. But what are you doing for Thanksgiving?
I'll go over to my mom's house. Leave the. I guess I can't call it. I guess I'm going to mom's basement now. I guess I can't say that I live in mom's basement anymore, but in principle, I still do. But you're celebrating it today, Dave, right?
Yeah, we're celebrating it today, and tomorrow my wife's got to leave to go out of town on Friday there. So we do it today, and really, I got to be honest with you, Thanksgiving is really my favorite holiday, favorite time of year. This week is usually the week I'm kind of the most on cloud 9. Obviously, I don't get out much. We had to do the whole run around thing yesterday. We've, as much as I like to cook around here, we love doing the honey baked ham thing at this time of year, and I'm sure several of our listeners like to do that as well. I mean, their ham is fantastic. Their smoked turkey is fantastic. Their sides, and it's just so easy because there's football and all going on these couple couple of days, Wednesday, Thursday, and of course on into the weekend, you're not having to slave over anything. Everything's easy to prepare. And in fact, probably about an hour after we finish this show, we're going to get into it for the first meal. We'll probably have about 2 or 3 meals off of it and all. But this is really my favorite time of year. And as I put on Twitter yesterday, I think we left the house for about 2.5 hours. And I was kind of excited ahead of time to get out and go do it until about a half hour into it. And then, the traffic, especially in Las Vegas right now, and it just ended up being a very nerve-rattling experience. But I made it back home, and now I'm in.
What's your favorite Thanksgiving side?
Side,
potato, stuffing,
mashed potatoes. Yeah, mashed potato. But I mean, look, don't get me wrong. I'm gonna eat mashed turkey and ham. I mean, last night I couldn't even wait to get. We got home and I made a couple of sandwiches out of it even before we started with. I think we got It's
cheating.
Yeah, heck, call it whatever you want. 4 pound. I think we got like a 4-pound ham, like 3.5 pounds of the sliced turkey. So, Honey Baked Ham is not an official sponsor of the Terrible Podcast. They probably should be. But all right, carry on. Where were we?
Back to Tomlin. Just talking about his aggressiveness and his decision making. What else did you take away from Tomlin's press conference? You want to hit the injury report, and I think there's a transaction that you want to probably hit on as well.
Well, first off, we'll a little bit of housekeeping. The Steelers I get my days mixed up here. On Tuesday, they waived Ryan Mallett from injured reserve. He had been there since suffering do you remember what it was? Do you remember if that happened during training camp, or was it that was before the preseason started, right? So I think he did that during a training camp practice.
It was definitely during camp. I remember the play. It was on the turf field. Not the turf field, but the third field they were on. I don't know what the injury was, but I remember it was definitely during practice.
Yeah, and I don't think we ever knew what the injury was. I think it went down in the books as undisclosed. But at that time, he had been placed on waived injured. He reverted back to IR and had been there ever since. So anyway, he was healthy enough that they waived him from IR on Tuesday, so he's now gone. The other kind of takeaways, if you will, the injury report. Mike Tomlin talked about Marcus Gilbert. I don't know how you took what he said about Marcus Gilbert, but it didn't sound like Marcus Gilbert was going to be ready by this Sunday against the Denver Broncos. So I think that would make 5 straight games. If that happens, that Marcus Gilbert will miss 6th overall. I mean, we'll see what the injury report says, of course, later on this afternoon, whether or not he practices. He left the door open, it sounded like, for him too, but we'll see. Stephon Tuitt, I don't know what to make. I'm not even going to guess on Stephon Tuitt until we see what happens on Wednesday at practice. Now, I think he said on the radio that he hopes to return this week, but he had said last Tuesday night that he expected to play against the Jaguars, and that, of course, didn't happen. I think the 2 injuries of note, and, I guess when we do these shows on, Monday, that's why I always caution, this is what Mike Tomlin said. We'll see what the rest has to say, or what he has to say on Tuesday, because he let us know on Tuesday about the Chicolo injury. We knew about that ankle injury, and then he added to it that Matt Filer was dealing with a pec injury that he played through the game with. So we'll have to see the status of those two. There are, it sounds like the Chicolo thing could be a little bit longer than just a couple of practices. In other words, I wouldn't be shocked if Chicolo missed the game against the Broncos. As far as Filer goes, we'll see. Obviously, if he is unable to go, and if Gilbert is unable to return, you would have Chuks Okafor and Zach Banner active against the Broncos. And I don't know about you, I wouldn't look forward to seeing Chooks line up against Von Miller. So we'll have to watch what happens with the rest of the injury report there. But those are the 4 names. And the only other thing I guess we're kind of looking forward to on this Wednesday is the official announcement of Ola Adeniyi returning to practice possibly on this Wednesday, and maybe even wide receiver Eli Rogers. Denier has been on IR with a hamstring injury. He would be potentially a designated to return guy, whereas Eli Rogers has been on PUP since the start of the season. Once both of those guys are officially announced as resuming practice, the Steelers would have 21 days to activate them to either the 53-man roster, release them, or keep them on the respected list that they're on. So those are the big injury kind of newsy kind of things that takeaways from what Tomlin had to say.
Yeah, Dave, I don't expect Gilbert to play Sunday the way Tomlin talked about it. So I think Fowler should play the way that Tomlin framed it, so he should be the starting right tackle. Two, it's kind of a coin flip. Matthew wrote about this morning that Tuitt said his goal is to play, but of course the player's goal is to always play. Malik, I think, just to circle back to it for 2 seconds, I think Malik was some sort of leg injury because it happened on a run play, so I think he got rolled up on or something. And for Denier and Eli Rogers, Tomlin said no decisions have been made yet, but right before that, Denier tweeted out that he is practicing. Tomlin was asked about that, kind of joked about it, and Denier magically deleted the tweet. So we'll see what happens on Wednesday.
You got to know he got a talking to either from Bert Lawton, their PR director, said delete that tweet, or somebody wanted to, anyway. That tweet magically disappeared well within an hour after Denier had posted it. These guys got to know that the team does not like the news out there before it actually gets announced and those kind of things. So we'll keep our eye on that. Here, the thing is, and here's what we talked about just the other day. Assuming Chicolo's down, I get it. Look, I know a lot of people are happy that Denier is going to be back practicing, but man, for 3 practices. How many snaps is he going to get? Is he that good of a special teams player that you would wind up activating him over a guy like Adams or Farrington-Huguenin?
Right, and that's where I was at Monday when we talked about it. I said there was no chance he would play. Now, maybe I'm going to be wrong on that. We'll see. I think he could be activated. It sounds like he will be activated and will open that 3-week window. But, yeah, if you're going to be the number 3 outside linebacker on this team, you got to play special teams. Chicolo, I think, is first or second on the Steelers in special team snaps. He's a core guy. And you're playing both outside linebacker spots, and you have to do everything that those positions ask you to, which is a lot. And like you said, for 3 practices for a rookie, a guy that hasn't, isn't probably quite there in football conditioning yet, I'd be really shocked to see him go from nothing to everything in a matter of just a week. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what Chicolo's status is. That's going to be the most important guy to all this. But I still think push comes to shove. If Chicolo's out, it's going to be either Adams or Huguenin.
Is there any way you, is there any way that you activate? It would just be one, right? If Chicolo's down, there would be no sense to pull up both Adams and Huguenin on Saturday because, of course, you would need to make 2 corresponding moves on top of it. And we already discussed what those corresponding moves may or may not be. It could be, if you're healthy at cornerback, it could be a guy like Brian Allen. Would be probably easy or an easy choice in that situation there. All right, what else did Mike Tomlin have to say that interested you? I talked about what did you think about the comparison of Juju to Hines Ward-like?
Yeah, big praise from Tomlin. You don't hear that too often. And it was more specifically in terms of what they do as a blocker, and those comparisons I think are pretty apt and pretty clear to make. But like I said before, Dave, I think I mentioned this on Monday, it's just the progression of Juju's game, how well-rounded he's become. I think he's become a more nuanced route runner. That 35-yard catch he had on the game-winning drive last week, that double move was a great route. And last year he wasn't a great route runner. He was just kind of someone that won with his size and just being a big slot guy. But now I think you're seeing more nuance and more ability to create separation, especially on the outside, which was a struggle point for him as a rookie this year. And so you're just seeing the maturation physically, mentally, and the toughness he has. It's been really fun to watch. And again, that dude that just turned 22, and the ceiling is sky high for him.
I know you weren't a big fan of ahead of the season of Sean Davis having to move again around to another position, but he really does look like he's settled in nicely now into that free safety position. And I think you had to write this up yesterday about Mike Tomlin talking about him being a traffic cop back there.
Yeah, I can pull up the quote here. And just to be clear, I thought he had the ability to do it. And when you look at the roster construction, you knew that Davis was going to be the free safety. It just made the most sense because you didn't want Morgan Burnett and Edmonds wasn't going to do it. The concern was just the transition. And I think I've been wrong to a decent extent that it's been a lot smoother of a transition than I expected. But, Tomlin talked about how important that role is as the hub of communication. And you saw those communication breakdowns the first month of the season. Is that all on Sean Davis? I don't know. I'm sure it's not all on him, but I don't think it's a coincidence that it's Davis has gotten more reps there. The communication is cleaned up. So, it's harder to tell. It's harder to know for sure, but I think that switch could create some of those communication issues when you have a new guy. As Tomlin called it, he said, quote, he's a traffic cop back there, if you will. He occupied the role Mike Mitchell occupied before him, that Ryan Clark occupied before Mike Mitchell. It's the hub of communication. It's a lot of responsibility that comes with that role. He's delivering similar, tangible production in terms of numbers and tackling, but this guy has made a dramatic step in terms of what he brings to us because he keeps a lid on back there. He communicates. He's a hub of communication. He's done a heck of a job of it, and I think he has. I thought the game against Jacksonville was a little bit tougher for him, maybe one of his worst games of this win streak, but overall, when Tomlin says they've kept a lid on it, they absolutely have. I think during this win streak, they've only allowed one completion of 40-plus yards. That's third best in the NFL. And we know how many of those big explosive plays they allowed last year that really killed this defense.
Well, what did you not like most about his play against the Jaguars?
Just some of the missed tackles, just some of those good runs become even better runs. I think Josh Carney has him down for 3 missed tackles, which might be a season high for him. So it wasn't the worst game, but just some of those coming down. Fournette got him a couple times.
All right. Mike Tomlin also talked about Javon Hargrave and what a game was that? Was that Hargrave's best game of his career?
I'd say yes. I thought against Carolina it was his best game ever against a run, and I thought Sunday was his best game against the pass.
And he played well against the run too against the Jaguars when not at. And you know what? And we talked about this the other day, and I think you might agree. I know you watched the All 22 since it came out, and I obviously spent a lot of time with it last night. Those gap exchanges early weren't doing them any favors. Up front.
They do some stunts up front, and it has more success with Hargrave than it is McCullers. They didn't do as much of it as they usually do, but when you're trying to stunt against these power teams that want to just take double team blocks and carry you, it's tough to do, and it didn't really work.
Right. I mean, you're taking a big guy, especially in the case of McCullers, that you want to manage the middle, and then you're moving them out of the middle.
Mm-hmm.
And they got gashed in that first half there. I didn't. Maybe you charted this a little bit more. Did they? It seemed like they did not gap exchange as much in the second half.
Maybe not. I haven't charted it. I don't chart that kind of stuff. And I don't think the gap exchange was the number one reason why the run defense struggled. I don't think there were any huge chunk plays off of those kind of ideas, or at least not directly as the result. Because of those problems.
It had to be a chunk play. All it needs to be is a 4.5 yard gain or more on 1st and 10. That's a successful play, and that allows them. That's the big thing going into this thing is you had to get them behind the chains, and they did a great job of staying behind the chains. So. Yeah, I mean, look, I get it. I mean, no chunk, play. How many runs did they have of over 10 yards? Do you remember?
I don't. It was probably
there
5,
wasn't
6.
Many. Was there?
5, maybe 5.
Let's see here.
Maybe it's a little high. I mean, I feel like they only gap exchange maybe 5 or maybe around the same number 5 times that game. So I didn't feel like that was the number one issue.
Fournette had a long of 20, and Hyde had a long of 11. Yeldon's longest was 6. We would have to go play by play or pull it up on Pro Football Reference to see how many they had. It wasn't so much the chunks I was worried about. It was so much the successful plays and keeping them ahead of the chains and stuff. So that's just something else for you and I to look at. But what do you think about the fronts, the usage of the fronts?
On the Steelers end?
Right.
Yeah, like I said, I thought it was a really good division of labor in terms of how they used McCullers and how they used Hargrave. McCullers became basically the base guy, and Hargrave became the sub-package guy, the nickel and dime defensive lineman next to Cam Hayward. I just thought, and I wrote about it Tuesday, that they found the weakness along that Jacksonville offensive line. And to be fair, there were a lot of weaknesses. They were down to their fourth-string left tackle, their backup center. But the guy they really went after was the backup right guard, Chris Reed, who came in somewhere around the first.
After Khan went down, yeah.
Right, with his hamstring injury. And Reed had barely played before. I think he had one start this year. He's a third-year guy from Minnesota State. And they just went after him with stunts, and Hargrave beat him one-on-one, and Vince Williams beat him for a sack. Legitimately, 5 of the 6 sacks the Steelers defense recorded Sunday came off of the right guard, Chris Reed. And Carl Dunbar has a phrase for it during the week. It's called the fish of the week, which is who's their weakest offensive lineman. If you're matched up against the fish of the week, we expect you to win. Now, Reed probably wasn't that guy because he wasn't projected to start or play, but once he came in and once you started having good success against him, he became fish of the week, and they just attacked him relentlessly. So I thought schematically they identified the weakness, both in run and pass, but especially pass, and that created some big splash plays.
And I guess the fish head of him coming into the game would have been either Shatley or Flowers.
Yeah, definitely. and they won.
You also wrote about this morning Keith Butler playing new coverage. You want to gloss over that real quick?
Yeah, there's a train coming because every time you toss it to me, there has to be a train coming. So you go ahead.
People don't care about it. Go ahead and talk through the train. They don't care.
I don't know. It's a loud train sometimes. It wakes me up sometimes still, and it's just that's the worst way to be woken up ever is by loud train horns. I just thought that Butler showed more flexibility as the secondaries played better and showed more comfort, and so he played basically what's called cover 7 or cone coverage, where if you have, and you should read the article because it's a whole lot easier to understand it reading it than it is me trying to explain it, but basically if the number one receiver has a tight or reduced split and runs an in-breaking route, the safety is going to come down and take him, and the corner is going to pass that off and play single high and basically become the deep safety instead. So you're just seeing different wrinkles. I think pre-snap you're seeing more safety rotation, which is a big thing that you and I have talked about. We've seen Baltimore, who has obviously 2 veteran and 2 talented safeties, do that really well with disguising their coverages. I think we're seeing more of that from Pittsburgh, and that has me excited going forward.
And especially if they can stay healthy. Because the longer these guys stay healthy, obviously they didn't have Morgan Burnett for at the start of the season there, and you had Edmonds in there, and you probably didn't want to put too much on his plate. So yeah, I'm with you. I'm excited. A lot of this is going to do the progression of them being able to disguise what they want to do on defense. Obviously, will probably be related to the health of this team. And we talked the other day about Jordan Dangerfield and how he played some cornerback in that game against one wide receiver sets for the Jaguars. He obviously should know the defense as well too. So yeah, it is exciting, but make no mistake about it, pattern matching type coverages aren't new. Here's the thing, though. We saw, and maybe we'll get into this a little bit more on the backside of the show here. The game against the Rams and the Chiefs the other night. I mean, we'll talk a little bit about how good or bad that game was from an NFL fan, blah, blah, blah. We'll get into that. But my question is, we're going to have to start see defenses as more and more of these offenses get more, I don't want to say complicated, but with so much creative, I guess, and with the window dressings and all like that, defenses are going to have to start adjusting to this kind of stuff, and pattern matching might be the key to better defending this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think it's one element. I think you can't play, and I think it's true before 2018, but you can't play just a spot-dropping zone coverage. I mean, teams will destroy you with it. I think if you look at Mahomes' zone man splits, he's phenomenal against zone coverage, and he actually is kind of decidedly average against man-to-man. So you have to be able to basically play more man coverage, whether that's true man or, like you said, a more matchup zone kind of coverage that becomes man coverage. But I think the biggest thing, and that game was so wild and a treat to watch, but what that game proved the most is that your defense just has to create splash. Like, teams are going to move the football, teams are going to get yards. That's almost unavoidable, unstoppable at this point. But if your defense can create enough turnovers and enough splash and an extra possession for your offense, that's going to be the key to win the game. And so, what was it, 2 or 3 defensive touchdowns for the Rams, and that's what won them the game.
Yeah, and I think that's what kind of made that game a little bit more unique. I mean, I joke that it's the National Arena Football League right now, and I like good offense. I like to watch this creativity of guys like McVay and Peterson and these younger coaches. I don't mind any of that, but I still, there's the old fan in me and my age still likes to see some defense, and unfortunately we saw some in that game. The strip sack is the new whatever, right? I mean, that's the new buzz. It's not good enough just to have a sack now. It's got to be a strip sack, either that or an interception. And we see with the Steelers right now, they're just not getting. They're still not getting that splash that you'd kind of hope for. It always seems every other defense around the league gets these fluky bounces, and you think, man, why can't the Steelers just get something, get a turnover like that? We're just not seeing it on the back end of the Steelers. However, we did see Watt get a couple strip sacks and all like that, and that's why I continue to say I'll rush over coverage. I don't know where you come in on that, but to me, until I'm proven otherwise or I see it with the Steelers, it's always rush over coverage.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. I mean, it's always both. I give that pretty cliche answer, but if you can rush with 4 with success and drop 7, then you're golden.
Well, that obviously the key thing too, and the thing is about blitzing and all. We need to get out of our head, I think, the mentality that blitz means more than 4, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can blitz with just 4 and be effective.
Right, and I think that's some of the when you and I talk about it and when we write about it. We need to put emphasis on the fact that it's blitz with 4 or less, or it's a blitz with more than 4, because I think people are trained in their head to think, oh, okay, blitz means more than means 5 or more, and that's not necessarily the case. You can blitz and be creative with the 4 guys that you're sending, and yet it's still considered a 4-man rush, but yet it's still considered a blitz at the same time. And I think that's one thing where Keith Butler is getting better at, is blitzing with 4 and being able to get the pressure.
Okay, Dave, I think we want to do our little ad read, and then we'll get to Ryan O'Halloran from the Denver Post.
Let's do it. All right, welcome back. And, of course, it is Wednesday, and the Steelers are playing the Denver Broncos on Sunday in Denver, and that means we have a beat writer who covers the other team on. This week we are having an old friend, Ryan O'Halloran, who previously, the last time we had Ryan on was prior to the Steelers' divisional round loss to the Jacksonville Jaguars. He covered the Jacksonville Jaguars for a few years and has since moved to Denver and covers the Broncos for the Denver Post. You can follow Ryan still on Twitter at Ryan O'Halloran, RyanOhalloran on Twitter. Ryan, welcome back to the Terrible Podcast. How's things out west in Denver?
Good, guys. Good to join you again. It's a little bit warmer this morning than it was for that Steelers-Jaguars playoff game, but not by much.
I hear you. Look, Denver coming off of a big win, kind of a surprising win over the Chargers, last-minute win as well. That game kind of went sort of like, especially at the opening to the Jaguars game, or the game the Steelers just had against the Jaguars. The Chargers jumped out to, I think, a couple of field goals there, and Denver hung around, and they battled back. Before we get into talking a little bit about the team, why don't you kind of update us real quickly on ownership, the battle with the Bolin family and all?
Yeah, I sort of walked into a hornet's nest when I moved here in May, but just for the background, Pat Bolin is still the owner of the Broncos, but because of Alzheimer's, he is no longer running the day-to-day team, has not since 2014. A 3-person trust runs the team on a day-to-day basis. Pat has 7 kids. They all will have a piece of the team once he passes away. In the last couple months, 2 daughters have expressed interest to be the next controlling owner. And then last month, Pat Boland's brother, Bill, filed a lawsuit here locally saying the trustees should be removed from power because of conflict of interest. So it is a mess, and I think moving forward it will have an impact on the organization if they decide to go find a new head coach.
When you look at the Denver Broncos overall, I mean, record and all, and look at the way the Kansas City is jolted out, to the big division lead here. The Chiefs, of course, did lose, and the Broncos made up a little bit of ground on them, as they did with the Chargers. Where is this Denver Broncos? We saw them release Pac-Man Jones yesterday. It looks like they're already making that kind of youth movement, if you will. Where is this team right now? And, head coaching, I would assume he's still safe there. The only question is now, I guess they need to find out, is Case Keenum really going to be their quarterback of the future past this year?
Yeah. Take those point by point. Let's start going backwards with Case Keenum. Has played interception-free the last 2 games after having at least 1 pick in the first 8 games. He counts $21 million on the cap next year, $11 million of dead money. I would expect him to be back to be the starter in week 1 of 19. That said, I think they need to draft a quarterback to get that person ready for the future, even if it is midseason. Vance Joseph is clearly on the hot seat. That's not going to be extinguished for a while. I mean, his season fell apart last year with an 8-game losing streak. This year's season fell apart with a stretch of 1-6. This is a big game for him on Sunday. If he's 7-9, does John Elway make a change? If he's 8-8, does he make a change? So, if Vance can manage to pull this one out, I think it would be good news for him. Pac-Man Jones, it was being phased out over the last couple weeks. Played only 5 snaps on Sunday against the Chargers. They feel comfortable with their top 3 corners and then plus a rookie. So, but this Bronco team overall, like you said, the Chargers and the Jaguars last week lost from the jaws of victory. The Chargers made several errors down the stretch, put the Broncos in position, and credit Denver, they took advantage by making a couple big plays.
When you look at their offensive line, obviously has gone through several injuries the last couple of weeks. They had McGovern, I think, who has normally played guard, move over to center. I think their tackles are still kind of in place with Bowles and Veld here on the other side. But, man, you look at the rest of it with Turner and McGovern and Wilkerson at right guard. They got it done against the Chargers. I mean, Lindsey had a good game and all like that. But overall, where is this offensive line at, and what are you expecting the injury report on Wednesday to look like for the Broncos?
Well, yeoman's work by this offensive line against the Chargers, giving up no sacks. They basically got 4 tackles on the field right now. Billy Turner and Eli Wilkinson were reserve tackles until Ron Leary tore his Achilles. Center Matt Paradis broke his leg. They had to move McGovern over from right guard, as you said. And now you got Turner at left guard and Wilkinson at right guard. Garrett Bowles, Jared Valdir, contained the Chargers' pass rush on the edges last week. For the injuries, when they practice later on Wednesday, Bradley Roby's in the concussion protocol, the number 2 corner. And then Deshaun Hamilton, the rookie from Penn State, re-injured his knee. He had a sprained MCL last month. Tweaked it again against the Chargers, so he'll be on the injury report as well.
Hey, Ryan, Alex Kozora here. I think one of the best stories of any offensive player this year in terms of the where did he come from kind of angle is Phillip Lindsay, an undrafted rookie from Colorado. Just give us some background on him, and when did people start to notice him, and his play has been excellent this year.
I totally agree. One of the best stories in the league this year. He's a Denver native, so he was always on the Broncos' radar. He had a prolific career here at the University of Colorado. He wasn't even invited to the combine, guys. I mean, how does that happen? And I mean, there's guys who slip through the cracks because they don't run well or they have a bad combine and they don't go drafted. But the Broncos took a running back in the 7th round, Dave Williams from Arkansas, who's now on another team. For Lindsey, first day of camp. This is before pads were put on. Brandon Marshall, the veteran linebacker, says, this kid's making the team. And so that sort of planted a seed. And he did so many things during these training camp practices. You're figuring there's going to be a role for him. He has exceeded my expectations because I'm sure, like you guys, a smaller type back like that, you think, okay, he's going to be a gadget guy. He's going to be a special package guy, 6 to 7 touches a game. But if you give him 12 to 15, it's going to be the law of diminishing returns. Philip Lindsay's been the opposite. He seems to thrive when he gets more work. He can catch it. He can catch it out. He can run it, obviously, between the tackles, and that's the biggest thing for a smaller guy. He can run on those base run plays. And with him and Royce Freeman, the rookie third-round pick, they have a really good 1-2 punch, and more importantly, a really good affordable 1-2 punch at that position for the next couple of years.
I'm gonna interrupt Alex real quick here. How is he with the football not in his hands?
Well, they are weaning him in on that. Devontae Booker is handling most of the third down work right now in terms of pass protection. During that last drive against the Chargers, Booker was on the field the whole time. But where Lindsey is dangerous is as a receiver, he can turn something out of nothing in the screen game. But I think you're starting to see him develop a little bit more of those route running skills as the season progresses.
Just sticking with rookies, another impressive guy you guys have is Courtland Sutton, the rookie wide receiver who's been one of the top vertical threats in the NFL this year, to be honest with you. And how has his development come along? Obviously, his role's expanded because of the Demaryius Thomas trade. Did you feel like that trade had a lot to do with Sutton's development, or was that the reason for trading Thomas separate than what Sutton has done? And just give me an overall evaluation of his play this year.
Sure. Trading Thomas was a direct correlation to they want to get Courtland Sutton more involved, but also they got a 4th-round pick back, and Demaryius was not going to be back next year, so they get a lot of cap relief there. For the first half of the season, Sutton was a 50-50 guy. Run down the field, see if you can catch the ball or draw a penalty, and he did pretty good at that. For Pennsylvania people, he reminds me of a young Allen Robinson when he came out of Penn State and played for the Jaguars. He's now with the Bears. Knows how to use his size, can out-jump corners. But what you've seen in the last couple of weeks is he's doing shorter routes to turn into yards after the catch. That's the next step in his development. And those are the routes that Demaryius Thomas was running. You look at the game, the second to last play from scrimmage against the Chargers, he got a 16-yard pass that he turned into a 30-yard gain. That's what they're going to be expecting out of him. And I think the future is bright for him. And you look at the receiver corps, if you bring Emmanuel Sanders back as your one, you feel really good about Sutton as your 1A next year.
Flipping over to the defensive side of the ball, a lot of familiar names over there, along with Bradley Chubb, highly rated young player. I think Von Miller and Chubb together have 19 sacks heading into this week. Another guy who I really wanted the Steelers to sign as an undrafted rookie several years ago is Shaquille Barrett. Really like him, but he's, it's not bad when Barrett's backing up those guys along with Shane Ray, another, I think, former first or second round draft pick as well too. You look at this, and Dometo Peko up front there is a name Steeler fans are familiar with during his time with the Bengals. Derek Wolfe, a highly productive guy, another guy that would fit absolutely great in the Steelers front. Back in Roby and Chris Harris Jr., half of the no-fly zone there. Justin Simmons is another guy the Steelers, I think, had their eye on, safety out of Boston College. Where's the weakness? What's the problem with this defense right now?
Well, a couple things. It's they've been plugging a new hole in the boat seemingly every week. It's they had a stretch where they couldn't get a takeaway. They had a stretch of 4 games where they had only 5 sacks. They had a 3-game stretch where they allowed an average of more than 200 yards rushing per game that sent them from 3rd in the league to 32nd in the league against the run. But if I'm a team attacking the Broncos, I go after anybody who's not Chris Harris in the secondary. And that's what the Chargers did. Chris Harris, does he follow Antonio Brown? Does he play inside in nickel like he usually does, or is he, maybe follow Smith-Schuster around a little bit? That's, if I'm the Steelers, that's what I'm looking at. Okay, which one of my guys is not being covered by Chris Harris, and that's where I'm going to go. So if you had to point at one thing that this team they just cannot get a lot of stops in the passing game. The no-fly zone has turned in sort of to the frequent fly zone for opponents this year.
When you look at how teams have run against them, now I think they did I watched the game this morning against the Chargers. It seemed like they did a little bit of better job against the Chargers in their run game, and obviously Melvin Gordon all. But on the left side of that, or when offenses rush to their left, which would be the right side of the Denver defense, it looks like that's where the yardage can be had there. Obviously, the Steelers don't want to get into a situation where they're having Ben Roethlisberger drop back, 35, 40 times in this game, because you just don't want Von Miller and Chubb getting after him. This defense can be run on, right?
Yeah, I think so. And they've given up less than 100 yards in the last 4 games, which is a positive for them. But you look at the Steelers last week, and James Conner had 9 carries. As you guys know, when that happens, the next week they're going to prioritize James Conner. They want to get him going again. And like you said, is you want to get into some 3rd and 1 or 2 or 3, so you can at least give the impression that you feel like you're going to run. So Von Miller at least has to think about, okay, do I have to contain the edge on this play, and that'll limit his pass rush. But when teams have had success when they've bounced runs outside it, around the edge, taking on these linebackers, taking on these safeties. So they've done an okay job on runs up the middle, but this is a back end that needs to continue to play well against the run.
Just 2 more questions for you, Ryan, then we'll get you out of here. I thought one of the most interesting stats with Denver, and I don't know if it's bad luck or what, but 7 of the 10 games this year have been decided by 1 possession, and here Denver sits 4-6. Do you think this team's better than what their overall record indicates?
No, I mean, maybe one more game. I mean, they're an average team. You look at the teams they've beaten: Seattle, Oakland, Arizona, and the Chargers. Well, the Chargers are the only one that has a chance at the playoffs right now. So, they, like you said, they played a lot of close games. The one they should point to 2 games. Week 4 Monday night, they led Kansas City at home by 10 points with 10 minutes to go. Couldn't finish the deal, lost. The next week got blown out on the road by the Jets, who stink. So those 2 games right now, let's say you win those 2, well, now you're 6-4. But you could play that game all day long. Is you probably should have lost the Charger game. You spotted the Raiders a 12-0 lead, so you probably should have lost that game. But going into the season, I thought this was an 8-8, 9-7 team, and with 1 or 2 games, that's probably where they'll end up.
And then just finally, do you have a prediction for Sunday? You know the Steelers team's pretty well after covering Jacksonville. Who do you think wins this one?
Well, I'm going to pick Pittsburgh because the Broncos haven't won 2 in a row since the first 2 weeks of the season. They haven't been able to win at home lately either. So I think there's going to be a lot of Steelers fans here gobbling up tickets on the secondary market. And I think Pittsburgh's going to win. I'll pick close again, but like 27-23, somewhere in that range.
What do you think?
Subject to change in Sunday's paper.
I hear you. What? There you go. What do you, with Adam Jones no longer on team, what do you expect to happen in the return game, real quick?
That's the return game right now is a mess. River Craycraft is another undrafted receiver. He took the last punt return against the Chargers. Deshaun Hamilton would have been that guy, but he can't stay healthy. So I would expect Craycraft on punts and then Devontae Booker most likely to be back there on kickoffs.
Well, Ryan, we certainly do appreciate having you on. You did a great job. I think a couple times last year we had you talking about the Jaguars. Unfortunately, this will probably be the only time we'll have you on this season, but stranger things have happened. If Denver ends up sliding in there, you can bet we'll be calling you back there. But we certainly appreciate you having you back on the Terrible Podcast again, and we appreciate your time and hope you have a happy holiday and a great Thanksgiving on Thursday.
You too, guys. It's always great talking to you.
Okay, Dave, thanks again to Ryan O'Halloran from the Denver Post. Really appreciate him coming on. Great interview to talk to. And I appreciate his honesty. I asked him about the Broncos record, and he said they're actually probably just an average team. They probably aren't better than what their record indicates. But I know the Steelers are still going to be in for a fight this Sunday.
Yeah, absolutely. This thing being in Denver. One thing we didn't talk about is that thin air up there, and Mike Tomlin talking about, the sickle cell or not wanting to talk about the sickle cell trade. I talked to Dr. Mel this morning on Twitter. I think she's going to do us a small post on the sickle cell trait and the dangers that come along with it. Of course, a lot of fans probably remember Ryan Clark dealt with that and had the serious incident back, 2007 or so. And Mike Tomlin was asked, are there any players that currently dealing with that? And he wouldn't give any names, and obviously because of HIPAA? Is that what it's called?
HIPAA. Yeah.
And look, I mean, you can definitely understand that with the with the privacy and the medical stuff and all like that. But if you remember back to I think August or so when Santonio Holmes was doing an interview on 93.7 The Fan, he kind of revealed that Antonio Brown has that trait. Now, is that is Mike Tomlin is that enough to prevent Antonio from playing? Well, Antonio has played, I think, in 2 previous games against the Broncos in Denver. Now, obviously, Antonio missed a playoff game a couple years ago, 2015, but that was because of a concussion. But anyway, look for Dr. Mel to have a post on that. As far as Ryan goes, look, folks, make sure you are following these beat writers on Twitter, and if you have a chance, reach out to them and let them know that you heard them on the show. It means a lot for them to hear that their 15, 20 minutes that they give to us is worth their while, and that, of course, is at Ryan O'Halloran, and you should be able to easily find that on Twitter. He covers the Broncos for the Denver Post.
Absolutely. Please reach out. A beat writer life is a busy one for sure. So for somebody to take the time to talk to us, we greatly appreciate it. And thank you again, Ryan, for coming on the show. Okay, Dave, you want to tell us about our friends at Robin Hood?
Yeah, Robin Hood, and have you seen the previews to that new Robin Hood movie?
Looks good.
It does look good. I'll probably wait for that one to come out on either HBO.
You're not going to go to the movies?
I went and saw Bohemian Rhapsody.
How was it?
Fantastic. Even if you're a tiny bit of a Queen fan, just familiar with the songs, familiar about the life of Freddie Mercury and all like that. I mean, it is really good. Make sure you go see it in one of those theaters with the fancy DTS sound or whatever they call it, but it really was a good movie. So that's one that I left the house for. There.
Can I give you the most unpopular opinion I'm sure I will ever give on the Terrible Podcast? I think Queen is the most overrated band ever. I'm not a Queen fan.
Yeah, I'm blocking you on Twitter. Let me tell the folks about Robin Hood and the Robin Hood app. Robin Hood is an investing app that lets you buy and sell stocks, ETFs, options, and cryptos, all commission free. I got a hold of the Robin Hood app well before I moved to Vegas because I was looking for something with commission free, and I wanted to dabble a little bit more in the stock market than I already had been at the time, and that allowed me to do that on the go. They strive to make financial services work for everyone, not just the wealthy. Non-intimidating way for stock market newcomers to invest for the first time with true confidence, and that is the truth. And for those of you that already may have the Robinhood app, I know you can back up what I'm saying with the ease and use of this. It has a nice little passcode that you put in there that helps get you into the app. That way it's protected if in case anybody gets into your, gets a hold of your phone there. It's easy to fund your account with the Robinhood app as well, too. It's simple and intuitive, clear design, with data presented in an easy-to-digest way. Once again, the highlights of using Robinhood and their app is cost, no commission fees. Other brokerages charge up to $10 for every trade, but Robinhood doesn't charge commission fees, trade stocks, and keep all of your profits. Easy design and use of the app, easy to understand charts and market data. Place a trade in just 4 taps on your smartphone. The Robinhood web platform also lets you view stock collections, 100 most popular sectors like entertainment and social media, and curated categories like female CEOs and analysts. Ratings of buy, hold, sell for every stock. You can learn by doing. And look, I mean, it's very simple. There's minimums when it comes to using the app. There's none. Learn how to invest as you build your portfolio. Discover new stocks and track favorite companies with personalized news feeds. All of that comes along with it. Now, if you go to Robinhood, they're giving their listeners a free stock such as Apple, Ford, or Sprint to help build your portfolio just for signing up if you're new. Sign up at Steelers.Robinhood.com. That's Steelers.Robinhood.com to get your free stock, and that'll get you started. You'll be able to see just how easy of use that app is, and we appreciate Robinhood for being a sponsor of the Terrible Podcast.
Absolutely. Dave, you've gone through the All-22, I'm sure, like 50 million times.
Not that many, about 3.
3 million?
No.
Anything else jump out from you from this game that you learned that you didn't know from Monday?
Ben's got to do a better job of taking what's, in a game like that, he has to do a better job of taking what's given him right out of the chute, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Saw a crosser early to Juju that ended up being thrown behind Juju. You look at the end zone view of it, and to me it wasn't an obstructed view. You got to get that ball out in those situations. If your first read's not there, you go to your second one, and you got to get the ball out there. There's no, and he was wide open across the middle there. And I think that was a second and 6 play. He had a lot of running room on that play. Little things like that pass to McDonald early in the game. Got to get that ball out. If it's given to you and it's easy, take it in those certain situations. Too many times we saw him try to force the football into areas where he was kind of asking for it, I think. He missed Antonio Brown on at least one play, had a nice double move, but Ben missed him there. I thought look, I mean, the scoreboard kind of dictated them get away from the run, but I thought they could have maybe done a little bit better job of maybe trying to stay dedicated to the run. But those are some of the initial things that and the gap exchanges on defense really kind of frustrated me early.
Yeah, I think those are all definitely good points. I think Power's been a little less successful. I think this team has put it on tape so often, and it's become such a staple concept to the run game that now defenses are saying, okay, we got to figure out how to stop Power. We have to kind of disrupt this play a little bit more. And I thought maybe that was, some of the issues for why the run game didn't work. And just Jacksonville's a good front. They're aggressive. They're a slanting bunch. It's tough to reach block them because they just line up in gaps. They'd never line up head up on you. And they're just a tough bunch to deal with. I just thought Jacksonville did a great job of controlling the line of scrimmage. I thought their tight ends did a fantastic job in the run game. I think that's a huge reason why Jacksonville was so successful establishing the run was from their tight ends, which felt like extra offensive linemen in the game. But I thought one of the other things Jacksonville did well was just some of those read option looks where the backside or the front side end in the line of scrimmage like Water or Bud Dupree had to respect Bortles, threat of keeping the football. And so they couldn't crash down backside as hard, and it kind of left them, a little lighter in the box because of it. And then later in the game, the Steelers just said, forget about it. Let's just play the run and just crash down every single time. And then you saw bigger backside plays from Dupree and Watt, and the final 3rd and 5 was a read option look, but Bortles just gave it to Fournette the whole way, and Dupree crashed down, could care less about what Blake Bortles was doing, kept Fournette inside, and Vince Williams scraped over to make the tackle. So, like I said, I just thought that it was indicative of how scared Jacksonville was to use Blake Bortles in any capacity, and I thought the Steelers got a bit bigger impact from the backside than they did in the first half.
And I think, and we already hit on this the other day, the other thing that really stuck out, and you didn't need the TV tape, the All-22 tape for this, just how little they trusted Blake to make some plays for them. Look, I know there are not a lot of fans of Landry Jones out there, and I was a fan of Blake Bortles coming out. I thought Blake Bortles could be, I thought he had a chance to be a better than average quarterback in the NFL. He obviously hasn't turned out to be that. It's going to be interesting to see what direction Jaguars moving forward. But they move. What did you think about the whole Landry Jones signed a couple of weeks before playing the Steelers, and then immediately after the game, Landry Jones is dumped? I think Cody Kessler is their backup there. Did they dump the best quarterback on their on their 53-man roster?
It was so weird. Whenever Jacksonville announced the move, like Jaguars fans were like, he cut the wrong quarterback, and that's the first time I've ever seen universal support for Landry Jones from a fan base.
Not well, okay, well maybe for them, but probably still not on the Steelers side, right?
Yeah. Oh no, yeah, not in Pittsburgh, 'cause that never happened. But it was like I said, it was weird to see from a different fan base. Yeah, I'm sure they asked Landry. I'm sure they got some information. I don't think he was signed solely because of that. He was signed a couple weeks ago, but I don't think it's a total coincidence either.
How much information do you think do they get in those? Because here we are, obviously Landry with the Steelers for such a long time, and through training camp and a lot of the installation, initial installation. But throughout the season, you have to change things up with audibles and formations. I mean, if you just stay stagnant, defenses are going to pick you apart. So how much intel do you think they were able to get? I mean, people were insinuating, well, they knew what that final, that shovel pass play was going to be due to intel by Landry. I don't think it's as cut as dry as that. I think it's kind of, I think the whole intel thing might be overblown just a tad, but maybe that's just me putting on a tinfoil hat too much.
No, I would even go further than that. I would say it's more overblown than just a tad. I mean, you learn a little, but you certainly don't learn a lot. And that, shovel pass wasn't because of Landry Jones telling anybody. It was because the Steelers have run it 8 times this year in goal to go and short yardage situations. It's a big staple play for them. So that's just film study, and that's where you're going to learn most of your information. But I imagine, there was probably 1 or 2 pieces of information that Jones could provide. And certainly when you're talking about a quarterback, they're going to have more information than, say, a wide receiver or a running back, because the quarterback has to know everything that's going on. So it's a good guy to talk to.
All right, your thoughts on the Chiefs-Rams game the other night?
It was a lot of fun. I know people kind of downplayed it because of the no defense. Somebody commented on me and said there was no defense for that game except for the turnovers. And I was like, well, that's kind of defense. And I was like, it's going to a party and being like, there's no pretty girls here except for those Victoria's Secret models. Like, you're like that, you have the biggest part of it there. Like, you get 3 defensive touchdowns in that game. That's defense being played. It was a lot of fun.
There was sack. I mean, Aaron Donald was Aaron Donald. I mean, yeah. Chris Jones was.
There was defense being played.
There was defense mixed in there.
Yeah, and so I thought people miscalculated the way they framed the game, and it was a rare game, but and of course I want to see Pittsburgh in the Super Bowl more than anything, but. I think Chiefs-Rams Part 2, I wouldn't be my second place for that.
When you look at the adjusted net yards per passing attempt for both these defenses here, well over 6. I mean, unless there's a huge shift, in historical and I guess what I'm getting at is I wouldn't expect both these teams to be in the Super Bowl this year. I mean, it would make for don't get me wrong, it would make for an entertaining game, but historically, these defenses aren't good enough.
Way to be a Debbie Downer, Dave. Only Dave Bryan can watch a 54-51 game and talk about adjusted net yards per pass.
Look, I talk about this all the time.
Mm-hmm.
During the playoffs, I think you need your defense to win you at least one game.
Sure.
And I mean, I would take the Rams defense over the Chiefs.
Definitely. Me too.
Because of
Better
Aaron
pass rush.
Donald. I mean, better pass rush, and of course you got Marcus Peters in the back end.
Talib's going to come back eventually.
Yeah, that's another thing. They're doing it without Talib right now, and because Wade Phillips is a damn good coach too.
Bob Sutton's a good DC for Kansas City.
Yeah, he is, but I think talent. But they got some talented guys on that side of football as well too. But I mean, is it a byproduct of their offense just? Their defense constantly out on the field. I don't know. I will be surprised if we have a Super Bowl rematch. And for those of you that do like to follow the adjusted net yards per passing attempt stat, the Steelers are up there in the top 10 of that number, well under 6 now. And once again, you try to, I will personally downplay that for the sheer aspect. The last 6 games, who have they played? And even after this week, I mean, what do you consider Case Keenum right now?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's a smart quarterback, but he's more of Case Keenum's more of an Alex Smith, right?
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. He's average. Had a lot of success with Minnesota last year, hasn't been able to replicate that with Denver. So, point taken there.
What do you think? I mean, we'll get into this game a little bit more deeper, obviously, with previewing it here on Friday. But you'd have to think that they learned a lot from the Jaguars in the aspect of hopefully, and talking about the Broncos offense here, being able to run the football successfully early.
Probably, but I imagine Denver's already known that. Denver has the best run game in the NFL in terms of a per-carry basis, and they're a different run game. Fournette is such a rare back who can kind of win in a lot of different ways, and I know, Ryan O'Halloran talked about Lindsey's ability between the tackles, but it's a different run game. It's probably more perimeter run game because of Lindsey's speed and ability to work out in space. So, they're not as, heavy personnel, fullback based the way that Jacksonville is. So I'm sure Denver has already known, that they've won their games and they've been in games because of their run game, and that's nothing that Jacksonville did is going to change that.
And even if you watch the game against the Chargers, you'll see Case Keenum kind of they'll sprint him out. And okay. I think they'll move him around a little bit as well too, because as we talked about, that offensive line of theirs, I sound like a broken record here, and you don't get excited as a Steelers fan anymore because of what's happened the last season, 2 seasons, or whatever when it comes to playing beat up offensive lines. I mean, this is the NFL, by the way, and people are expected to be the next man up kind of situation, but they are beat up. Center, guard, all the interior. So it'll be embarrassing if the Steelers are run on up the middle by the Broncos, A, because of their injuries they've had up front, and B, because Philip Lindsay's just not – that's not his game. Now, the other couple of running backs, Freeman and Booker, are obviously more inside runners. But, yeah, I'm with you. I think they need to get Lindsay out on the edge and get the ball out in his hands in space. Obviously, we know who Emmanuel Sanders is, and we'll get into breaking down a little bit more what Sutton Cortland, what's the last name? Sutton, right?
Cortland Sutton.
Right, can do. I mean, we obviously came out of SMU, and that's where Manny Sanders went to school as well, too. So anything else? Look, we got a little bit of breaking news coming in, and kind of expected. The Steelers have placed Ola Adeniyi on their reserve injured designated to return list. All that means is, yes, he will resume practicing on Wednesday, and now they have 21 days to do something to make a move with him. I have not seen any announcement on Eli Rogers, Alex. So even though Mike Tomlin didn't totally rule out him returning to practice on Wednesday, I'm not seeing an official announcement on Eli Rogers. We'll see if there's one later on the NFL transaction report. But I mean, even if is there a reason to start practicing Eli just yet?
Well, I mean, I guess just get him practiced in case something happens these next 3 weeks. But I agree there's no real path for him to come back. There's a path for Adeniyi. I don't see that for Eli Rogers, but an injury certainly could change that. One last topic I have, Dave, we'll touch on real quick, and anything else that you want to touch on. The 25 semifinalists for the 2019 Pro Football Hall of Fame were announced Tuesday. Alan Faneca, Hines Ward make the cut. Pretty much expected. I think they did last year. I think Faneca should get in this year. You guys know my thoughts on Hines Ward, but what's your reaction, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at the offensive linemen on this list with Boselli, I think Boselli belongs in at some point. I don't know if this is going to be the year. Steve Hutchinson was a great interior offensive lineman for the Seahawks and Vikings, and I think Tennessee Titans at one point there. I think he maybe gets in at some point. Kevin Mawai, I'm not so convinced will ever get in. Great center. I don't think this is the year. I guess in so many words what I'm trying to say is I would expect if there's going to be an offensive lineman to get in this year, I think it's Faneca. I really do. I mean, I understand him. I understand the why he may have not up until this point, but I think this is now the time. I think fourth time should be the charm with him. And like I said, I definitely can understand Boselli getting in as well too. But I personally, and I watch, I grew up in a time where I got to watch both these guys play. I would put in Faneca above Boselli. Now, as far as Hines Ward goes, I've said this several times. I think I said it on the podcast too. 10 years ago, I would have told you Hines Ward was a slam dunk, first ballot guy. That obviously didn't happen. I don't think he obviously wasn't. I think he's going to have to wait a little bit longer for this log jam to clear out ahead of him, and hopefully the log jam doesn't stack back up kind of in that dead time. I mean, you got guys like Isaac Bruce, Torrey Holt, and I know it shouldn't be just looking at the position the guys play and all, but it's hard not to look at it that way. And you had multiple wide receivers go in, this last year. Hines Ward changed the game as a blocker, but obviously was has the Super Bowls and the MVP and all like that. I just not sure it's going to be enough this time. I think at some point Hines Ward maybe does get in, but I just don't think it's this time.
Yeah, I don't think it's this time either. I don't think it ever happens because that logjam you talked about, it's just going to keep piling up. Like, believe it or not, I think it's going to be in 2020. Calvin Johnson's going to be eligible for the Hall of Fame. Like, that's what we're getting at this point. That's the era. Now, obviously, Johnson retired super early, but that's kind of where we're at. And those guys are shoo-ins for the Hall of Fame. Like, they're going to get in. And Ward's just going to constantly be lagging behind in that area. So who are the locks to get in this year?
I think Ed Reed.
Yeah.
I don't see how it can't be Ed Reed. I mean, when you go, obviously Faneca's probably not a lock.
No, I mean he can't be a lock. He's gotten in before. Tony Gonzalez.
Oh yeah, Tony Gonzalez.
Yeah,
that's
Gonzalez
a lock. I mean
lock.
that's two right there. John Lynch, I don't know if John Lynch is a lock.
No, 7-time semifinalist, so I wouldn't call it a lock.
Ty Law, I mean,
nah. Zach Thomas.
Nah, Zach Thomas is a great player. I don't see. I think we hit the only two. Yeah. That are potential locks here.
Yep. That's probably fair. So there'll be an opportunity, and like I said, I hope Faneca gets in. It'll be a really good debate between Boselli and Faneca. I agree, but when's the next? Is there another cutoff date? January 3rd. Is that what you wrote? January 3rd. 15 down to 15 January 3rd.
Well, they go. They go to 15 on January 3rd, and then after that, it goes from the cut down from 15 to 10, and then to 5, and then of course the Veterans Committee and all like that. So, all right. Anything else we got?
That's all I got. What about you?
That's it. Until we get to Friday, we'll preview the game a little bit more between the Steelers and the Denver Broncos take place on Sunday. Make sure you're reaching out to Ryan O'Halloran on Twitter and thanking him for coming on the show. You can follow me on Twitter at Steelers Depot. You can follow Alex Kozora on Twitter at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. Reach out to Robin Hood on Twitter as well, too, and let him know you heard the ad on the Terrible Podcast as well. And as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.